Welcome to Bridging the Gap, the differences between CyberSec First Responder 310 and the updated CyberSec First Responder 410. This webinar is intended for instructors who are used to teaching CFR 310 and seeking to learn the differences with the updated material. In today's session, we'll take a look at the differences between the 310 and 410 exam, instructor resources, including bridging the curriculum differences with Jason Newfrick, the CFR-410 author, and our alignment with governmental programs. We'll close out by reviewing frequently asked questions and provide contact information for any additional questions you may have. The blueprint for the CFR-410 exam is structurally much different than the previous iterations. The domains are now based on active job tasks rather than general concepts. The scope of the exam has also widened to include more than just incident response. This reflects the need for first responders to integrate with every part of an organization's cybersecurity operations. Still, you'll find that much of the actual detail of the exam objectives is familiar. This is why the CFR 410 course hasn't deviated too much from the 310 version. One thing that has prompted a change is the protect domain in the new blueprint. This domain focuses on proactive security architecting. As a result, the 410 course includes a new topic on cybersecurity auditing, as well as some additional content that touches on areas like identity and access management, patch management, and so on. Other items to note about the exam is that there are now 80 items versus 100. This will allow candidates more time to complete the candidate agreement and the Pearson VUE testing tutorial. All of your instructor resources will be available when you purchase any of the instructor bundles via Logical Operations or CertNexus. This instructor kit not only includes your student and instructor ebooks in the form of PDFs, but also train the trainer videos. This is great if you haven't trained CFR before or are just looking to refresh if it's been a while. These videos are recorded from the live Train the Trainer session and will be available at the end of November 2021 on the Choice platform. But don't worry, if you've purchased prior to them being loaded, these will be updated as soon as they're available. You'll also notice on the right-hand side a smaller tile called the TTT Resource Link tile. This provides access to a drive that includes curated material from our master instructor from the Train the Trainer, including links, updates, and helpful hints. You'll also receive a CFR 410 exam voucher as part of any bundle purchase. We highly encourage you to take the CFR 410 exam. This voucher is good for 18 months and includes a free retake, just in case you're not successful on your first attempt. We also have in some of our bundles labs available if you do not want to do a local setup. This is great if you're instructing students who are remote or in a virtual setting. And finally, don't forget that we also have the mapping to the CFR 410 exam, which is a great study tool. Now, other things that you'll see in the Choice platform included on the tiles here are helpful things like checklists. We have heard that this is a great study tool. We also still have our Files tab, which includes all of your PowerPoints that you'll need for your instruction, as well as any setup instructions if you choose not to use the labs. The assessment is intended to test topics within each of the lessons to see how well a student is prepared to take the exam. It is not intended as a test prep product. Finally, you'll have the opportunity to connect with us on social media and also subscribe to other options, including our CertNexus Smart Brief and our quarterly newsletter. Now I'd like to introduce Jason Newfrick. Jason is the author of the CFR 310 and 410 courses and is our partner at Logical Operations. Jason brings a wealth of experience within this area and will take us through the curriculum differences with the updated CFR 410 material.
Hi everyone, my name is Jason Newfrick. I'm an instructional designer at Logical Operations, a sister company of CertNexus. And just give you some quick background on myself as far as CFR goes. I've been an author on CFR since the beginning, CFR-110, and a primary author since version 210. And today I wanted to, with the help of this bridge document, go over some of the changes that have occurred from the previous version of CFR-310 to the latest version of CFR, the upcoming version, CFR-410. So I wanted to step through this bridge document, and just to begin with, I'd like to give an overview of some of the things that have changed and some of the things that have stayed the same. And overall, for the most part, things are the same as far as the same mission, the same audience, the same prereqs, and even the same alignment with the DoD 8570 and 8140. So for the most part, those components between CFR-310 and 410 are the same, and even quite a bit of the structure of the course has stayed the same, and even I would say most of the content is the same as well. Now, the changes that have occurred have been through for numerous reasons, not the least of which is the fact that the security landscape has changed since CFR-310 came out. There's also quite a bit of instructor feedback, SME feedback and input that we've received, and of course the main driver of this new version of CFR-410, which is the new exam that this maps to. So I wanted to start by just briefly going over changes to the exam at a high level. I'm not going to go into detail as far as the exam itself. This is more about the courseware. But of course, since the exam influences what's in the course, it is necessary to point out some of these changes at a high level. So as you can see in this table, we have the same amount of domains on the left here from CFR-310 that are in CFR-410, but of course, as you can tell, the actual domains, or at least the names of the domains, are quite different. Now, from an instructional perspective, the differences here are mostly in terms of how the exam positions itself and positions each domain. So whereas in CFR-310 you have domains like threats and attacks, data collection and analysis, those are sort of conceptual ways to word the exam objectives, the domains, whereas in CFR-410 things have sort of switched to a more active role-based approach, more task-based. I would say. So instead of just a concept, we have verbs, we have actions like identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So those are, I would say, the biggest high-level changes from the exam, from the previous exam to the new exam. Now, despite the fact that the names are different, I would say most of the content is the same. There are some differences that we'll go over that'll influence the course. But for the most part, the content is largely the same. And in some cases, the objectives have expanded. There is, I would say, more coverage, more overall coverage, more breadth in the CFR-410 exam than is in the CFR-310 exam. But just keep this in mind, and you can, of course, refer to the exam objectives for more information about the differences between the exams. But for the most part, we're going to focus on the course. So just to give you an overview of the changes in this new course, of course, overall, the new CFR-410 reflects updates to the cybersecurity landscape, like I mentioned. There's new threats and challenges that occur almost daily, weekly in our security industry. So we update the CFR-410 courseware to meet those changes, to address those changes. And of course, like I mentioned, the changes to the course are driven largely by the changes to the blueprint, the objectives for the new exam. And one domain that I wanted to point out in the new exam objectives is the protect domain. So unlike in the previous version of CFR, the objectives and the course mostly focused on the more responsive or recovery aspects of security, whereas the new exam also does focus on those, but it also focuses on protection. And through this new domain, it really emphasizes preventative measures, not just response, but prevention. and using various security architecting tasks to anticipate and then hopefully mitigate or even outright deny an incident from having an effect. So that's one of the things that I think is most significant in terms of a change in the exam objective that has influenced a change in the courseware, which again I'll go over in more detail as we get there. Now, one thing that is different besides the content is the new slide template that we're using at CertNexus and at Logical Operations. So up until this point, we've been using a standard 4x3 format to our slides, but based on some input from the community, we've decided to switch to a widescreen 16:9 format. This is obviously more modern. It fits better with, I would say, most modern screens, regardless of the size. So we decided to go that route, and I'll just give you an example. I'll pull up the slides. And you can see, obviously, this is a wider screen format. Some of the branding might look a little bit different, but for the most part, the actual templates for this that you can use for the slides are the same. It just has that wider format that gives us more space to place whether it's text or images. And we've also made the slides more visually engaging and less heavy on the text, which can sometimes overwhelm students or instructors like yourself. So we've decided to make things more visually interesting, and as a corollary to that, we've also upgraded our graphics icon library to have a more consistent visual style and one that aligns better with the CertNexus color palette. So just to give you an example, if I go back to the slides, for example here, we have a slide like this which uses images like this, icons, as more of a visual cue or indicator, or to keep something visual, keep a slide visually interesting that's not really illustrative of any sort of complex topic. For example, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, just a cookie representing digital cookies, of course. But other than this sort of visual flair, if you will, we also still retain the more illustrative diagrams throughout the course. So, for example, if I go to the slide here, we can see the example of DNS poisoning. We still have these diagrams where we sort of step out what's happening, and in this case, what's happening in a specific attack. Now, in these instances where we have network diagrams or some kind of networking component, even though we have new icons like our attacker here and our user, we also still incorporate these Cisco icons for any networking devices. And we've decided to do that because we know that those are commonly accepted in the industry as far as illustrating examples through a visual medium. So we've kept these Cisco icons, and those are examples of servers. This Cisco icon for like a laptop, switch, and a server. So we've kept those. But otherwise, we've given the slides that visual overhaul, which of course also translates to the manual itself in the figures. So that's a high-level overview of some of the changes. Now, this next section here is more going over the structural changes for CFR-410 as compared to CFR-310. I'll just briefly go through this table where we have each lesson and topics for 310 on the left here, and then 410 on the right. And anything in blue is a topic in 410 that has undergone significant or at least noteworthy changes. Anything in black has largely stayed the same. And then there's one example of something in orange, which is a new topic altogether. So I'll go through this in more detail as we get to the actual content. So to start with, of course, we'll look at lesson 1. And here we have a list of the different changes or the different noteworthy or major changes to each topic in a lesson, if it did receive changes. So for example, under lesson 1, we have topic A, and here we have sort of reduced or minimized references to enterprise risk management, and instead we decide to focus our wording more on just general risk management in an organization, because obviously organizations that the students are employees of that take these courses aren't necessarily considered enterprises, or they might not be at an enterprise level. So we want to broaden that perspective to just general organizational risk management. And the principles are largely the same. It's mostly about the wording in that particular case. Now, one thing that has received changes is topic B. Previously in CFR-410, there were knowledge blocks for pretty much each type of document, whether it was a framework or a standard or a law. Whereas now we've decided to consolidate them. There's quite a bit. There's even more in this that are called out in the objectives in the new exam. So we've decided to consolidate them into tables. So I'll show you what that looks like. So here is an example of a table where we just describe the different security standards and frameworks. We have things like NIST, cybersecurity framework, different NIST special publications like 861, and multiple other ones. And some of these, I would say most of these we actually called out in the previous course, but now they're in a table format. So you can choose to go through these in depth if you wish, or if you would just like to point out specific ones, then of course you can talk about SSAE 18, for example, and not NERC 1300. So really it's up to you what you want to focus on. These are all, for the most part, at least mentioned in the exam objectives. It doesn't mean there's going to be a question on them, but these are all covered from the exam objectives. And of course we have a table on security laws and regulations, things like SOX, FISMA, privacy standards and frameworks, and also privacy laws that we list as well. So that's just a different way to organize what is essentially the same kind of content. So back to the bridge document. In topic C of this same first lesson, which is on organizational risk management, we've decided to reduce the emphasis on generating aggregate CIA scores and instead increase emphasis on documentation and reporting. If you look at the new objectives, documentation and reporting is called out in several different areas. It seems to have even greater focus than it did before. So I've decided to try and incorporate and illustrate the importance of documentation throughout this new course. And of course, topic C is where we do that first. So in the previous version of CFR-310, in topic D, our activity had students create a security policy based on an existing template. Now, in CFR-410, the activity is largely the same, but instead of actually having them create the policy or add multiple items to an existing one, we're focusing more on having them review the policy. So there's less of a chance of the student getting tripped up or getting too stuck on trying to add too many items to a new policy, and instead their focus is more on what's in the policy, why is it important to include these items in the policy. And another thing is that in the previous course we suggested that the students or the instructors set up Microsoft Office as the program in which to actually work with the template. You can of course still do this. It's still based on a Word document. But in this new CFR-410, we decided to sort of take away the burden of obtaining Office, installing it on different computers, and instead we have students run LibreOffice, which is an open source version of, or alternative to, Microsoft Office. And because it's open source, we can include it in the data files, we can distribute it, and it is largely the same in terms of functionality. It's pretty easy to use, and of course the steps do reflect this change of software. But of course, if you want students to still use Office, then they can still do that. They can open up this template just fine in Microsoft Word. So lesson 2, topic B, has undergone some changes. The content is mostly the same. There is some new content on the TCP/ED architecture, for example. There's updates to what we consider new and upcoming threats, exploits, security challenges. But really the focus, and if I go back up to the structure, whereas the focus was in CFR-310, topic B, on performing ongoing threat research, so it was hyper-focused on threat research, whereas now we're broadening that focus to analyzing trends that affect not just threats, but security in general, and the organization's posture as far as meeting whether it's new risks, threats, or security challenges. So it's a little bit more encompassing. It still, like I said, includes much of the same material. There are some new things. Now in lesson 3, topic A, in the activity we had students in CFR-310 use a modeling tool called CMonster to create a threat model. Now we realize that again, sort of like the issue with the policy template, that some students might get tripped up in the mechanics of creating the template, and it might detract from the actual purpose or objective of the activity, which is to demonstrate the threat model. So instead of having them use CMonster to create the threat model, what we do is we provide the threat model in different pieces, and then we ask students questions about how they would fill out the next part of the threat model. So really, as an instructor, the idea is that you would show the student the beginning portion of the threat model, and then the next portion, and then the next, after asking them questions about what they think should go in that threat model. So as an example, here's the full threat model, and this is a slide that is animated, so I'll play this. And so it starts with our root node, our web server attack. And then we have our different specific types of attacks that could affect the web server. And then, of course, we have different remediations for each of those different attacks. And of course, as before, as you ask students questions, they might come up with different attacks or different ways to remediate those attacks. So this is, again, just an example of how someone might approach a threat model for this specific scenario. And this was created in a program called draw.io, which is open source, and we also include in the data files as well as the actual source file. So if you did want students to have the ability to either adjust this model or create their own from scratch, they're more than welcome to do that. So in lesson 4, topic C, which is the assessing the impact of malware topic, we have an increased focus on ransomware and how it operates. So I'm sure, as everyone is aware, ransomware seems to be growing, especially as we see in the news stories. It seems to not be slowing down at all, so we figured it'd be a good idea to not just mention that it exists, but sort of how it operates and the mechanics of how a ransomware attack might function. Now, topic D, we've taken an approach to cutting some of the content that was there. And this approach was done because in these new objectives, we've seen that there's more content really that's being talked about. So we want to make sure that in the course, we're still able to address all the exam objectives while at the same time making sure that the course is still within 5 days of training. So some things like knowledge blocks we decided to cut. We thought that these were perhaps less useful or less interesting, or perhaps not as up to date as some of the others. So for example, NBNS spoofing, WPAD hijacking, those are some examples of knowledge blocks that we've decided to cut. Also in topic D, we decided to improve and clarify our explanation and the diagram for DHCP poisoning. So hopefully it's a little bit more clear to students. Now in lesson 5, which is the post-exploit lesson, in topic B in CFR-310, we had students load up a anti-rootkit scanner and have them scan for rootkits. Now, of course, students didn't actually find any rootkits, presumably, on their computers, so it perhaps was a little bit uneventful, and we felt that instead of having students load up the software and not have it actually show them anything really of interest, we decided to take out that hands-on component and instead refocus the activity to be more discussion-based. So in this case, we're discussing with students how they might identify a rootkit or any other kind of persistence in the after stages of an exploit. And in topic C, we improved the diagrams of port forwarding and SSH pivoting. So again, hopefully they're a little bit more clear to the student. Now in lesson 6 incorporates perhaps the biggest structural change in the course. So I'm going back to the table of differences. So previously, lesson 6 was managing vulnerabilities in the organization. And lesson 7 after it was the penetration testing lesson. Now, in the new lesson 6, we decided to consolidate both 6 and 7 from CFR-310 into this one in CFR-410. So now instead of just managing vulnerabilities and then pen testing separately, we're compiling it into an overall attempt at assessing the organization's security posture. So topic A is the only all-new topic in CFR-410. And this is where we implement cybersecurity auditing. Now auditing is an objective under the protect domain in CFR-410's objectives, exam objectives. So we felt that because we don't address auditing really anywhere in CFR-310, it needed to be its own topic somewhere. And we felt that it made sense for it to come within this overall package of assessing the organization's security posture. So first, we're implementing auditing. Then we are implementing a vulnerability management plan, which maps to topic A from CFR-310. Now topics B and C for CFR-310, we've consolidated into one, which is just assessing vulnerabilities. And here we're still using GSA, the Greenbone Security Analyzer, to analyze the vulnerabilities on our Windows server. So that's all part of that one topic C objective. And topic D is a consolidation of all of lesson 7 in CFR-310. And most of it carries over lesson 7, topic A, which is where we actually conduct the pen test. And we still use Metasploit to do that. Topic B, instead of being its own topic, it's been rolled up into this topic D here. And we really reduced it and simplified it to one knowledge block about following up a pen test. So this new lesson 6 is really the biggest change. And just keep in mind that from here on out, the actual numbers, the ordering of the lessons has changed. So whereas 6 and 7 were consolidated into one lesson, that means that overall, if we scroll down, CFR-410 has one fewer lesson in it than CFR-310. So keep that in mind. The numbers as I go forward will be different than you remember. So 7 is now what 8 was in CFR-310. So just keep that in mind. Now, as far as the new topic, topic A on auditing, of course, we go over compliance audits and just a general approach to auditing. We bring in some of the frameworks and the standards and the laws that we mentioned earlier and how they pertain to auditing. And as a new topic, it needs a new activity. So what we've done is we've created a form, basically, for students to do an audit of their own. Now, it's very simple, and I'm going to load up that form here. So here's the form that we have students fill out. It's really just a simple checklist. It's yes or no answers. We give students the places to actually determine these answers, where they can go to determine, is the account lockout on the server threshold set to 20 failed attempts. We tell them where to go to find that. And we tell them where to go to find the local security policy. And in this scenario, we outline a scenario for physical security that they should be able to use to answer these questions. So in this form, there's those 3 different sections: domain password policy, local security policy, and physical security. And students fill them out to the best of their ability. And there is a right answer to each one. So I'm just going to fill this out and just show you what happens. So again, just a simple yes or no form. These aren't the correct answers. I'm just filling them out. And then so once students fill them out, they can select submit, and then it gives them the number of successes, the number of times they've said yes, and then the audit failures, the times they've said no. And then of course it divides that. It gets an average score based on how many successes to how many failures. So really just a not a complex auditing form, obviously. It's really meant to get students thinking about how they might conduct an audit and how they might document that audit if they're called upon to do that. So moving on to lesson 7. Now remember, lesson 7 is what used to be lesson 8 in CFR-310. So this is the data collection lesson. So just some minor changes here. In topic A, we used to talk about the difference between agent-based versus agentless SIMs. We've decided to move that where we think it's more appropriate, which is in the topic in the lesson on SIMs. So we moved that. In topic B, which was collecting network information, we added some more material based on endpoint detection and response, and the difference between span versus tap as far as collecting security data. Something like EDR is called out on the new objectives more so than it was in the previous objectives. So we wanted to give some room to talk about that as well, since we hadn't before. So in lesson 8, not much has changed. I'd say the only meaningful change is in topic B. We're still using Splunk as a SIM, and we're still looking over our Windows event logs using that. This time, whereas in CFR-310, the search queries in Splunk were perhaps a little too broad. It might have been difficult for students to pick out the signal from the noise. Whereas in CFR-410, we give them some better search terms, search strings that are more meaningful and better help them answer the questions. So this question here, how would you look specifically for SSH password failures for the admin account? That came from Kali Linux. Whereas before we just had them look for password failures in general. This one helps them focus on ones that are relevant to our scenario. So then they can add this query, and then they'll hopefully get results that are more focused and are more revealing of what has happened as far as what the event log records. So lesson 9. So this was lesson 10, which was the performing active asset and network analysis lesson. So in that lesson, if I go up to the table, in that lesson we had 4 topics. Topic C, analyzing malware. The new objectives, the new CFR-410 exam objectives, have downplayed or reduced their focus on analyzing malware. So instead of having an entire topic on that, we've decided to consolidate. And this topic has gone away, but we've rolled up the more pertinent information into both topic A and topic B. So topic A talks about malware analysis tools on Windows, and then topic B talks about malware analysis tools on Linux. Another thing that's changed is in topic A, in the activity, in CFR-310, we had students look up through Process Explorer the Java runtime environment, which was installed at the beginning of the course. We use this as sort of just to demonstrate what a unusual process might look like, and then how to investigate it more, like looking at its registry entries and what it does. Using Java is kind of prone to breakage. In fact, recently it stopped appearing in Process Explorer. So we decided to move away from that dependency and just create a quote-unquote suspicious background process ourselves. So just to show you an example, what we do is in the course setup, we have whoever's doing the setup run this executable, which runs in the background. It doesn't show anything, doesn't tell you that it's running. And once it's running, we can open up Process Explorer, and we can filter by company name or sort by company name. And we can see our unknown process here. It's got a description. It's even got the name of our fictitious scenario company, Develotech. And we have students look at, again, we have them look at like registry entries or different handles. So you can see here that this particular process has a handle into the registry, and it's reading from the registry area that can define what programs run on start. So we have students look at that. We have them open up the registry to this current version run key, and we see that our suspicious process has embedded itself in that auto run directory, and then we have them remove that registry key and then remove the actual process from running. And we also have them uploaded to VirusTotal, where some virus scanners do mark it as malicious. So other than that, it really does nothing other than embed itself in this auto run directory registry key. So hopefully that's a little bit more exciting, for lack of a better term, than just looking at Java, because it truly is a unknown process that if you saw this through Process Explorer, you'd probably be suspicious of. So in topic B of lesson 9, just some minor changes to the activity. Instead of having students use the deprecated if config, we're having them use IPA to look up their networking information on Linux. And we also, instead of just using top by itself to see processes that are running on Linux, we also compare that to PSAUX to show them the difference between a static list of processes and the more dynamic, always updating list through top. And of course, because we got rid of what was topic C for malware analysis, the new topic C was what topic D was before, which is looking at indicators of compromise. So lesson 10 is the incident response lesson. And topic A, in CFR-310, we used a sort of generic incident response model that had 10 different phases of the incident response process. It was a little overly convoluted, and we decided to instead standardize on the NIST SP861 model instead. That's a commonly accepted industry standard that a lot of people rely on. And we have this here where it's the NIST SP861 is 4 phases of incident response. It's preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery, and then post-incident activity. And of course, some of these phases can loop back on each other, and they obviously influence each other. So the content itself was already kind of structured to meet that those phases before. So really, it's more about contextualizing these distinct phases that NIST has. So in topic B of lesson 10, in CFR-310, we really focused on mitigating incidents in the sense of response, so a very, very responsive. Whereas, as I mentioned in CFR-410, the focus has gone beyond just response and is now about prevention. And so for topic B, we decided to include countermeasures and other mitigation tactics that not only can be used in a responsive manner, but also in a preventative manner. They could even be used in both. So just some examples. Identity and access management is one. Patch and update management, mobile device management. And a lot of these are called out on the new objectives. And we don't go into too much detail. Really, it's just one knowledge block per these new management methods. And because we assume that students have enough prerequisites in these sort of topics like mobile device management and patch and update management that we don't need to belabor the point. We assume that they have enough knowledge for it to be adequate. But nevertheless, we do introduce it in the context of mitigating incidents, because those obviously can prevent incidents from occurring, or they can reduce the effect of an incident. So lastly, in lesson 10, we just have a minor wording change to the title of topic C. So if I go up to the table, this was in lesson 11 in CFR-310, and topic C was called Prepare for Forensic Investigation as a CCERT. Now in CFR-410, we've decided to title that Hand Over Incident Information to a Forensic Investigation. Because really, the content is pretty much the same, and what we were doing was not really preparing for a forensic investigation as a CCERT, because the CCERT is really tasked with handing over the information that they discover to forensic investigators. So really, by doing this, we want to emphasize the transitional nature of the CCERT into the forensic investigation. So a minor wording change, but it more accurately reflects what we're actually doing. So in lesson 11, which is the lesson on forensic investigations, we continue the scenario that we started in the previous lesson, where we have this potential insider threat engaging in industrial espionage, specifically our attacker, who's named Rupert, trying to exfiltrate data from Developtech. That scenario from 310 is largely the same. There's a few minor details that are different, but for the most part, the scenario is Rupert, we believe, is trying to exfiltrate sensitive company secrets. Now, one thing that has changed is the actual activity in topic B, where we analyze the USB drive that we suspect him of using to exfiltrate data. Now, before in CFR-310, the drive was constructed just of loose files. So when we went to analyze it, it didn't really reveal too much, and we didn't see any deleted files like the scenario would suggest. So in an effort to make the activity more robust, what we've done is actually created an actual partition of a USB drive that we mount on Kali Linux, which we then use that to analyze the data on the drive. And in doing so, we can reveal much more about what Rupert is doing and his attempts at is covering his tracks, basically. So if I load up autopsy in Kali Linux here, this is a analysis of the same collection of files, and some new ones actually. But now, if I scroll down, we can see some of these in autopsy are red, which implies that they've been deleted. So if you actually look at the mounted drive, these files will not appear if you looked at a normal file browser. Only through autopsy can we, or a similar tool, can we see that these files have been deleted. And if we go to all deleted files, we can actually just get a list of all the files that have been deleted. And we see that there's many more files that seem particularly sensitive than were there in CFR-310. We have the watch images that we saw before. The watch images like, this watch here, and this one. So other than images, we also have some interesting finds like a product spec sheet. Once we export it, we can see that we have a spec sheet for Developtech's secret smartwatch product with lots of different potentially useful information to a competitor. And there's also some other interesting information like a budget spreadsheet. There's a data set that could be used for machine learning, and there's actually some source code that pertains to the watch in some way. So really the objective of enhancing this activity was to make our findings more robust, and hopefully with students they get more of that aha moment where they can see that Rupert, in this case, is up to no good. So that about does it for the main content. Some of the appendices have changed. We've decided to remove the Appendix C, which is security resources. it had the list of tools, documents, frameworks, laws, things like that. We decided it was a little bit too unwieldy and perhaps not as, it didn't have as much value as we may have thought originally, so we decided to remove that, and also the appendix on the DoD operational security practices. Moving down to the next section, we have third-party tools that are used in the course. The difference in terms of setup is mostly that we're still using Windows 10, we're still using Kali Linux, but now instead of using Windows Server 2016, we're using Windows Server 2019. And other than that, the actual versions of Windows 10 are up to date. They were keyed on more up-to-date versions. Other than that, there's really no major difference between the tools that are listed here than in CFR-310. All these are pretty much the same except for the one I mentioned earlier, which is LibreOffice. So lastly, just some miscellaneous things to point out. Of course, like I said, the environment has not changed drastically. You still have 2 machines per student, or 3 machines depending on how you configure Kali Linux. But the Windows machines are essentially the same, whereas Windows 10, but instead of Windows 2016, it's Windows 2019. So really, those are nothing new as far as keying the activities. The one new thing that we added for the environment was Kali Linux. We now offer as a downloadable OVA file, which includes the virtual machine itself, and everything has already been set up on it. All the files that need to be there are already there. There's no need for you to install it. The only thing you would need to change is the networking information to make sure that it's different for each student. And of course, if you're using a solution like the Logical Labs or the labs through New Horizons, you don't actually need to worry too much about that because the interface will already be set up for you. But if you are setting up the course locally, then just keep in mind that you can just use the OVA file on whatever virtualization platform you're using, whether it's VirtualBox or something else. So one thing that has changed is the default shell that Kali Linux uses. It might look a little different, but instead of using the bash shell, it uses the Z shell. The Z shell is actually based on bash, and the syntax is pretty much the same. The commands are pretty much the same, with some discrepancies that are noted in the courseware. Really, you should be comfortable using this if you're comfortable with using bash. So not much different. It just looks a little bit different, as you can see. Now, one thing that has changed, not really related to the shell so much, is that by default, in previous versions of Kali Linux, if you're used to those, the default user was root, and you would actually run Kali Linux as root. In this new version, instead of doing that, you run Kali Linux as a super user, or a user that has super user access. So in order to actually perform commands that require root access, you'll need to use the sudo command before, or whatever command you're trying to use. And anytime this is necessary, it's actually called out in the courseware. But just, I wanted you to be aware that instead of typing something like, fdisk L to get a list of the disks, it'll say permission denied because you need to actually sudo and then enter the password, and then there you go. That gives you the actual list of disks. So something to keep in mind, your muscle memory may trip you up and prompt you to just type a command without sudo, but just try and remember that many of the commands actually require super user privileges. So that's pretty much it as far as the differences between the courseware in CFR-310 compared to the new CFR-410. I hope you found this session useful and that you have a clearer picture of how things have changed in the courseware and how they've stayed the same. Of course, you can always refer to this bridge document whenever you want if you need to recall a certain change or dive deeper into what's changed. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the new CFR-410 courseware.
Well, thank you so much, Jason, for that overview. As we finish up today, I know there's been a lot of questions about some of the new initiatives that have come out and how CFR relates to things like the cybersecurity maturation model, and NIST. So NIST is designed, just as an overview for those of you that may not be aware, for the entirety of an organization to be compliant with the NIST framework. CMMC is a developing model to assess and audit compliance of the NIST Special Publication 800-171. Now, that's a lot of words, a lot of numbers, and we've always aligned CFR to the cybersecurity personnel requirements for the areas within incident response as lined out with the CMMC model, audit and accountability, and risk management. And we'll continue to provide any additional updates regarding alignment as the CMMC model evolves. But keep in mind, as you see here on this chart in the dark blue areas, that indicates the tasks that are assigned to cybersecurity personnel. Those are the areas that we really focus on with CFR and our alignment and our mapping to. Now, when we talk about NIST, it's always important to keep in mind that the NIST is, from an educational standpoint, we look more at NICE, which is the National Institute for Cybersecurity Education. This was created to align cybersecurity education to the NIST framework and to those special publications like SP 800-171 and 172. And it really speaks to the roles within organization and how they align to the NIST framework. Now, with the changing landscape of directives such as the CMMC, you can be sure that CFR aligns with roles as designated here, and we fall under, within the NICE cybersecurity workforce framework, we fall under protect and defend, analyze and investigate in these 9 specific roles. For more information about how we fit into the NICE framework, you can go to certnexus.com/NICE-framework. Now, finally, we want to answer some frequently asked questions that we often get as instructors are shifting from one version of a courseware to another version of the courseware. Also, knowing that you have an exam voucher included in your bundle, the number one question we get is, do I need to get certified on CFR-410 to teach it? We highly encourage all instructors to have certification, first of all, so that you can speak to the exam to your students who are preparing for it. Second of all, we have a new program coming out in Q1, which is our authorized CertNexus instructor program. And for that, you will need to be certified in a CertNexus program in order to fall under and apply and be approved for that acknowledgement. Now, what if you have your CFR-310 certification? Do you still need to take the new exam? Once again, we highly encourage everyone to take the updated exam, once again, so that you can see the differences for your students as you're preparing them in the courseware. Now, as I said, if you want to take it and, hopefully everyone who is prepared to teach it will pass, that's the expectation. But you remember, you do have that free retake. Now, as the document that Jason was going through is the bridge document that is included in the course material. You can find that in your files tab. That is included in the instructor material for you as a resource if you want to go through anything as Jason went through great in the last part of this session. And then if you're brand new to teaching CFR or it's been a while, any additional resources that you have, remember those train the trainer videos. We also have the LOIC Logical Operations Instructor Community Group that is on LinkedIn, and we have the instructor resources through our partner at Logical Operation as well. Anything else that you have, please feel free to use those TTT resources within the choice material you find there. It's a great resource to dive in and get a little bit deeper into the material as you prepare to train your students. Now, as a big thank you to all of you, we are extending a 50% off code for all trainer kits and resources. This includes all of the CFR-410, which if you look in the store, this is Logical Operations and the CertNexus store. It starts with CNX 0013. This includes all of the bundles, the logical labs, for you to purchase. This is good through the end of 2021 using code CFR-310. Now, just as a helpful hint, remember you do need to be logged into your account in order to get that discount. And you can have, if you're part of a training center, they can get that discount as well by using this code. There are no limitations to it other than it ends at the end of the year. So get your information soon. Any additional contact information, if you have ordering questions and you've ordered through the Logical Operations Store, you can contact them at the phone numbers you see here or at assist@logicaloperations.com. If you have questions about certifications, you can contact us at certifications@certnexus.com. We hope that you found this session helpful. Please feel free to share with any of your instructor friends or contact us with any additional comments or questions.